All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the May webinar put on by the Northwest Gas Association. My name is Connor Wrighton, and I am the Communications Manager for the Northwest Gas Association. And today we have not one, but two presenters, and Sherry Merrow and Jeff Clark, who are both on hand from the NGVAmerica team to discuss the latest on the VW settlement. As many of you know, the Northwest Gas Association has been very engaged on this VW settlement issue for some time now, as have some of you. But this will be a very good opportunity to get a baseline for those who might not know what's happening around VW, while still getting a deeper dive into some of the thoughts and strategies that NGVA is bringing with regards to this opportunity. Before we begin, let's review some of the basics for how these webinars work. We have set aside some time for questions, and we strongly encourage you to ask them as they come up. Each of you will be muted throughout the presentation, so please use the text box to type your questions, and we will do our best to get to those questions at the end of the webinar. Jeff and Sherry have given us permission to convey a PDF copy of this presentation for those of you who ask for it. We are also recording, and we can send along a link about an hour after we conclude. You can get access to those by sending me an email at creiten@nwga.org, and I'll get you a copy of those things before the end of business today. As some of you know, we do these webinars on the last Thursday of each month. And next month, we're going to be doing a webinar with Steve Jones of ITM Power Inc. On June 22nd at noon. He's going to be talking about power to gas and the role that electrolysis will play in the energy industry going forward. As well, I like to imagine that all of you are already signed up for the 2017 Annual Energy Conference, which is scheduled for June 7th and 8th at Skamania Lodge. In case this is not true, we ask that you mark your calendars as such and head to our sign-up page at NWGA.org. Finally, I'd also like to mention that the Northwest Gas Association is currently going through a strategic planning process. A significant part of that process is better understanding the needs of our member companies and knowing more about their thoughts on the gas industry. For those of you who are employees of our member companies, we ask that you please complete a brief survey in order to help us with this process, and send me an email if you're willing, so that I can respond with a link. We are offering a $25 gift card, which will be drawn as an incentive for completing this, and we ask that you do that before close of business Friday of next week. Of course, I'd also like to introduce the Northwest Gas Association for those of you who might not be familiar with us and what we do. We represent the 6 investor-owned gas utilities operating in the Pacific Northwest, along with the 3 large natural gas transmission lines. Our members are located in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and British Columbia. And as always, you can visit our website at nwga.org for more information or send me an email. And without further ado, I will pass things over to Jeff and Sherry.
All right. Well, thank you, Connor, and thank you, Northwest Gas Association, for having us here. We appreciate the opportunity to spend a little time with you this afternoon and talk about a subject matter that's important to our organization, and I'm sure your organization as well. Today's presentation will provide an overview of key elements of the Volkswagen settlement and discuss how to ensure that NGVs become a significant part of state plans for funding by the settlement. To benefit from the settlement, it is important to frame the discussion in a way that highlights the key benefits of NGVs and explains to policymakers how NGVs can achieve the objectives of the settlement. The presentation that I'm going to give is intended to show that NGVs are the cleanest and most cost-effective choice for policymakers. To be effective, our industry needs to engage with policymakers and advocate for NGVs and NGV-related projects. Our suggestions to you are, along those lines, to engage with policymakers, submit comments, be a resource for policymakers, start working with others to strategize and plan projects, and of course, to use the materials that we've prepared today. So just a little bit before I dive into this about who we are. NGVAmerica is a national trade association, about 200 plus members. We represent all facets of the vehicle industry that's involved in natural gas vehicles, vehicle manufacturers, station builders, utilities, and a variety of different other equipment suppliers. just to give you kind of a quick snapshot, we do have a very diverse membership, including large fleets. So you see Waste Management, you see Ryder, and UPS and others that are very active in this market space and are on our board and part of our membership. So diving right into it, the issue with Volkswagen and the settlement, this is an issue about mitigating NOx emissions and taking actions that will reduce NOx emissions. The Volkswagen vehicles that were non-compliant put out excess NOx emissions, and basically I hope your one big takeaway from this is that creates a big opportunity for natural gas vehicles because we have a great solution for NOx emissions. The settlement focuses on 10 categories of qualifying mitigation actions. Medium and heavy duty vehicles factor heavily into the settlement in terms of qualifying action. This is because medium and heavy duty vehicles are the #1 source of toxic air contaminants and ozone forming emissions of nitrogen oxides in many US metropolitan areas. And as the slides will show, there's a huge opportunity to reduce emissions by focusing on medium and heavy duty vehicles, since 3 out of 4 commercial vehicles on the road today are older and do not comply with the latest and cleanest emission standards for vehicles. This next slide shows that while air quality has improved over the years in our country, millions of Americans still live in areas that fail to meet air quality standards. Reducing the emissions targeted under the Volkswagen settlement will have an important impact on these people's lives. Volkswagen presents a huge opportunity because it provides a significant and much needed source of funding, $2.9 billion for states to encourage cleaner medium and heavy duty and non-road equipment. Volkswagen sold more than 500,000 non-compliant diesel vehicles, including 2-liter and 3-liter vehicles that in some cases emitted 40 times higher than they were legally allowed to. The solution under the settlement consists of 3 major components: a buyback and fix component for consumers who own the vehicles, $10 billion, an environmental mitigation trust to reduce excess NOx emissions or address those excess NOx emissions. That's $2.9 billion set aside for that. And then $2 billion set aside for zero emission vehicle related projects. The $2.9 billion portion of the settlement is probably that's the provision in the settlement that will most benefit natural gas vehicles, and we're going to focus on from this point forward in the presentation. We're going to talk about how it could potentially benefit natural gas vehicles that are operated in local freight trucks, transit buses, school buses, and other on-road medium and heavy-duty applications. This next slide gives you the breakdown and provides a detailed overview of the funding that has been set aside for individual states and tribal authorities. This Volkswagen has already started to contribute money to the mitigation trust, and states will start having access to this money possibly as early as next year. The qualifying mitigation mitigation funded under the settlement delivers emission benefits largely by replacing or repowering older, dirtier diesel equipment with new, cleaner vehicles or new, cleaner engines. The on-road focus that we're going to talk a lot about today is on class 4 through 8 vehicles. So we're really talking about larger commercial vehicles. Another important factor to consider when talking about these projects is scrappage is a requirement for replacing vehicles. So if you're familiar with the DERA program, the EPA DERA program, you know about scrappage, but that means if you get funding for a replacement truck, you must essentially destroy the old truck. There's some ability to do some recycling, but you must essentially destroy that truck, so you cannot resell it. The amount of funding for replacements or repowers varies by the type of entity that is receiving the funding. Government entities qualify for funding of up to 100% of the cost of a new vehicle or repower. private businesses qualify for up to 25% of the cost of a new vehicle or 40% of a repower. In the case of a new natural gas truck or bus, this means that 25% of the total cost of a new truck can be offset with Volkswagen funding, or 50% if we're talking about a drayage truck. And that's 50% of the total cost. Not 50% of the incremental cost, but 50% of the total purchase cost. If the NGV is a government-owned vehicle, the funding, of course, as I said, it could be up to 100%. Many states are trying to determine what is the appropriate level of funding to provide for government vehicles, since they have flexibility to go to 100%, or they could lower that amount. NGVAmerica is encouraging states to maximize the benefit of this program and to provide a level less than 100, something that would pay the full incremental cost of a new vehicle and provide some sort of compensation for the fact that you have to scrap the vehicle, but something short of 100%. This is the environmental mitigation timeline. This is something that over the course of time has changed a lot and still has a number of to be determined dates in here. And we've had to revise our thinking on this quite a number of times. But just to give you some of the highlights, the court has approved the settlement relating to the 2-liter and 3-liter vehicles and the $2.9 billion. As of May, that has been finalized. The court issued its latest decision on May 17th, in fact. The next major milestone is for the trust agreement to be finalized. That's the vehicle that will hold the funding that will then flow out to the states. That trust agreement spells out in great details what states have to do to access the funding, and that agreement is still undergoing some changes. Wilmington Trust has been a trustee and is negotiating with states on some changes to the trust agreement. We anticipate that the trust could be finalized in the very near term, hopefully early summer. Once the trust is finalized, submitted to the court with the necessary signatures, the trust will become effective, and then a whole series of dates will start to fall into place. The states, for their part, will have to request to become a beneficiary, which was like a no-brainer, but there is a formal process of indicating that you do, in fact, want the money. States have to develop their mitigation plans, and they have to submit their mitigation plans to the trustee. A number of states have already begun this process of developing their mitigation plans. If you've seen the weekly updates that we send out, you've seen that many states, most recently Pennsylvania, released a draft plan. And the mitigation plan, what they do is they spell out how the state plans to allocate its funding, whether it intends to fund all the eligible categories or come up with some sort of narrow list of things to fund, or to adjust funding provider needs and other amounts that provided. Also have to put an estimate of the benefits of the actions they're going to fund. At the earliest, this is the thing that a lot of people really are interested in. When's this money going to flow to the states? When will fleets start to access this funding? We're currently thinking not until early 2018, given the fact that we still haven't had a finalized trust agreement yet. So this being a significant opportunity, even if NGVs only receive a small percentage of the overall funds, this could still be a huge opportunity to fund more NGVs in the next several years, if not longer. Advocates for other fuels, though, are very active in trying to ensure that their fuels get most or all of this money. So it's critical that our industry make the case for why natural gas vehicles should be funded and why we are the best to use this funding. NGVs should do well under the settlement for a number of reasons. NGVs deliver very low NOx emissions. This is about NOx emissions. NGVs are much more cost-effective and more readily available than other promising technologies like electric vehicles. To make the case for NGVs, we have prepared materials showing that NGVs are the most sustainable, responsible, and the most available of all options that are eligible for funding under the settlement. And the next several slides will underscore those points. Sustainability. Here we're talking about really about the emissions benefits of NGVs. So this is about NOx, and we have the cleanest NOx technology available in the marketplace in the heavy duty space. Key part of our argument relies on the emission benefits of the new low NOx or near zero trucks and buses. These new engines deliver 90% reductions over the federal standards, and they're 90% cleaner than available diesel vehicles. Trucks equipped with these new engines have a similar emissions profile to that of a heavy-duty battery electric truck plugged into the electrical grid. And there's a very detailed study that was done by GNA that provides a lot more background on that. So if you have questions about that, we can make sure we get that information to you. These are the engines that are being certified and that meet these low NOx standards that I was talking about. The one in the middle plays very prominently into the refuse market, transit bus orders, and regional short-haul trucking, cement mixers, and so forth. And it's a very popular engine that's very versatile and can fit into a number of different applications. For trucks that are pulling a larger load, need something a little bit bigger, the engine to the far right will be available in the first quarter of 2018. That also will be certified to a level that's 90% cleaner than the federal standards. Those are called optional low NOx standards under the California regulations, and both of these products will be certified to the lowest standard of 0.02. To the far left is the smaller engine, the 6.7 liter. This is an engine that fits well in smaller medium-duty vehicles like school buses and shuttle buses and other types of applications like that. It is currently certified to an optional low NOx standard of 0.1, which means it's 50% cleaner than the federal standard. So it's a very clean engine. In the school bus market, there are other engines that are available now for natural gas that can be ordered, like the products that Roush is currently making. This next slide makes a very important point in this policy debate about who's got the cleanest technology. But not only are natural gas vehicles much cleaner than diesel vehicles when looking at the certification data, importantly, they are much cleaner when looking at in-use emissions. Studies of trucks operating in low-speed settings, such as regional trucks or local trucks, or even drayage trucks in near-dock operation, indicate that diesel trucks emit at much higher rate than they are supposed to, as much as 5 times more. So when the analysis from the diesel advocates say that, well, we're as clean and we're arguing about a very small amount of emissions, they're taking credit for the fact that they're meeting these new EPA standard 2010 standard, but these studies show that in use they don't actually achieve those standards and they have much higher emissions. Natural gas trucks, as this chart shows, do meet the standards in use. So they meet them in terms of certification, they meet them in terms of in use. And really in this short time we have, the reason is because of the emissions controls that are set up for diesel trucks work very well in certain applications, but they require higher speeds and higher temperatures that you don't see in some of these lower speed applications. So they're not benefiting from that emissions control equipment. So in terms of sustainability, the discussion often focuses not only on criteria pollutants, but on greenhouse gas emissions. And this issue obviously will be more important in some states than others. But here we have a great message to tell as well. This is conventional natural gas compared to diesel, 11% reduction for LNG, 17% reduction for CNG. This is well to wheel, so we're looking at everything, upstream emissions and the vehicle emissions as well, based on California Air Resource information. And our story gets even better when we look at renewable natural gas and the role that it can play. Currently, about 21% of all natural gas used for on-road transportation is renewable natural gas. We're estimating that in 2018, this will grow to as much as 40%. So if you factor that in and average it out, it brings those numbers up that I said before, 17 and 11%. It brings those numbers up on average for natural gas, and for fleets that are using 100% renewable natural gas in their sustainability plans, they're able to show extremely large reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, if that's important. So this next slide looks to show that when you combine these two things, and this is really the basis for the study I talked about, the GNA Game Changer report that was put out. When you combine these cleaner engines and renewable natural gas, you really have an unbeatable solution. And the key point in the Game Changer document is that this combination is the most cost-effective option for reducing air pollution and addressing greenhouse gas emissions. And in many cases, it's the only viable option when we're talking about the larger type vehicles, the heavy vehicles where battery electrics are not really available in the marketplace today. But even where they are available, if you look at the Game Changer report, what that report says is that dollar for dollar, you just can't beat natural gas, because you can deploy a lot more natural gas vehicles with a given amount of money than you can electric vehicles. And so you're going to have a bigger impact on emission reductions because of that. So being responsible, we talked about the things that favor natural gas: sustainable, responsible. So responsible means that using this funding that's available under Volkswagen will deliver the greatest number of total vehicles compared to other alternative fuels. So we're going to put more vehicles on the road than the other alternative fuels. And we're going to deliver the greatest amount of NOx reductions compared to these other options when you look at what can be done. And the next several slides really show this out. What we've selected are some of the qualifying applications, like short haul trucking and so forth. We picked 100 if you're funding government, you kept on. The point was we wanted to provide the same sort of level of funding across all the technologies and see how they compare in terms of cost effectiveness and NOx reductions. And you see the natural gas vehicles are more cost effective, $39 per pound versus a higher amounts for diesel and electric, more total tons reduced than for diesel and electric. And we did this in a number of different applications. This also takes into account scrappage. We looked at different types of programs where if you're replacing a vehicle that typically has 15 years of life, it may have 5 years remaining. If it only has a 12-year life, it may only have 2 years remaining. So we plugged that into the A-Fleet model and ran some comparisons, and this is the result of these comparisons. And so not to go through each one of these are materials that we have provided to folks, and I just wanted to show them here. But it shows across the board. I mean, I think states are going to want to fund these different technologies. So our intent is not to say that short haul is better than refuse or refuse is better than, say, a school bus, but just to show what the cost effectiveness of these different technologies are. There's probably a role for all of these different applications in the Volkswagen funding. I'm going to skip through here to this slide. You know, another important selling point for natural gas vehicles is the lower cost of operation and the lower cost of the fuel. Fuel savings certainly are not what they once were, but in some areas of the country, natural gas continues to sell at a very healthy discount to diesel fuel, so it is a strong selling point. And large private fleets that use lots of fuel can negotiate attractive pricing for natural gas, so they can sometimes get better pricing than what is available in retail. And in the case of these fleets that use significant amounts of fuel, the savings can mean a fairly quick payback in terms of investment. If you're talking about a $20,000 or $50,000 incremental cost that needs to be bought down. Certainly, when you look at the Volkswagen settlement and combining the lower cost of the fuel and the money that's available under Volkswagen, natural gas vehicles can be very attractive and can provide a very quick payback. The next several slides demonstrate that we are a very mature industry, or natural gas vehicle industry is a mature industry with a large network of vehicle providers and vehicle upfitters, and that we have a wide variety of vehicles that are commercially available today. I think that's an important point to make, that these are dollars that the states are going to want to put to work in their economies as soon as they can. They're going to want to buy technologies that exist today, not technologies that will not be available for a number of years. So we really play up the fact that we have a lot of OEM product that's commercially available today. So this is just kind of an overview of the different companies that are available in this space. You've got the major manufacturers in refuse, the major manufacturers of trucking, transit buses, and so forth, making natural gas vehicle products today. And these are just some slides. I think the intent of these really is to show policymakers that not just a list of names, but these are actual vehicles in use that fleets around the country are using today in these different types of classes that qualify for funding under Volkswagen. And also certainly non-road projects are funded. We haven't focused as much on that in some of the materials we've put together to date, but there are natural gas plays in rail and marine, and we are seeing interest in that. And if you're in a state that has an interest in that, we can probably work with you and put together some more materials. There is a lot of interest in this space. So we're almost getting to the end of the issues I'm going to address, and then we'll turn it over to Sherry here in a few minutes. So other advantages of natural gas certainly are that it's a domestically available fuel, it's low cost, and we have a very positive outlook in terms of supply and price stability. You guys don't want to see that. Okay. Next slide here is where gas industry folks on the phone know that we're the #1 producer in the world. So putting more natural gas to work in vehicles means reducing our reliance on foreign oil. It means putting more people to work in states where there's production. It means increasing revenue to those producing states, and it creates economic development all across the country wherever natural gas projects are taking place because of fueling station development. There are some models and tools that show that fueling station development generates a lot of jobs. So there's a lot of very positive aspects that go to natural gas projects that can be promoted to policymakers. And when we talk about our supply, I think a lot of people question, the renewable natural gas. Certainly it's a large part of the market today, but people question how large that market could grow to. And the Renewable Natural Gas Coalition has a lot of great materials, significant opportunity to expand here. And in fact, some of the concern is that we need to grow the natural gas vehicle market faster so that we can use all this renewable natural gas that's coming online, which you see in the next slide. Huge growth since 2013 in renewable natural gas. 2018 is expected to be a big year. As I said before, that could be about 40% of the on-road market could be renewable natural gas. And virtually all the cellulosic fuel that's being used under the renewable fuel program today is natural gas. So price stability, another advantage and a result of our abundant supply here in the U.S. is that the long-term outlook for prices looks good. We have a lot of volatility with gasoline and diesel, but we look to have a sizable advantage in the out years based on what the EIA is projecting. So in conclusion, not conclusion to the whole presentation, conclusion to my part, we think NGVs are the best value for states to maximize the use of their VW funds. What we would recommend to you in terms of your interaction with states is to is to make the case that the states should fund alternative fuel vehicle projects that maximize NOx reductions. They should provide greater funding for vehicles that deliver NOx reductions that are greater than currently required. We ought to use these funds to really stretch the envelope and encourage those technologies that are cleaner than they have to be. And certainly they should target funding for technologies that actually deliver lower in-use emissions. Now, what we talked about earlier about the study showing that some of these diesel trucks and low-speed applications have higher emissions, it would not be a good use of public funds to fund those types of vehicles if they're not going to reduce emissions. And they should prioritize funding for projects for commercially available products. You know, as we point out, we have lots of commercially available products today, and we don't think the states need to wait for the next latest, greatest technology to come along in 5 to 10 years. They can put that money to work today and reduce emissions. So at this point, we're going to turn over the presentation to my colleague, Sherry Merrow, who chairs our State Advocacy Committee and is really very closely working with a number of probably you and other state advocates in promoting this opportunity. So I'll stop there and turn it over to you, Sherry.
Thanks, Jeff. So if you take a look at the next slide, I put in a little bit of an overview here of the NGVAmerica State Government Advocacy Committee. And this committee is made up of our members. We have about 75 companies and 160 people that are members of this organization. And as you can see from the objective, our goal is to promote the growth of CNG or LNG-powered vehicles, both on-road and off-road, by influencing state-level government, legislation, regulation, and administrative policies. We do focus on regionalizing this. We have 6 regions, as you can see on the left of the slide, and these 6 regions are headed up by co-chairs who get together as needed with the people who have identified with that region to help support growing NGV policy in these states. And this also has expanded to include VW or any NGV incentive programs. So we basically work with the NGVA members, but then also with key stakeholders and groups, working with NGV coalitions, gas associations such as yourself, and Clean Cities coordinators. As I said, well, we have 2 committee co-chairs, myself and Ray Drake is with UPS. Jeff supports us as the director from NGVA. We have the 12 regional co-chairs, and then we have state leads. So we have people in each state who are the state leads, and Connor happens to be the Oregon state lead and also a co-lead in Washington. So good representation here. And we're really available to coordinate and cooperate and work together. NGVAmerica did put in an Oregon comment letter and worked closely with Connor and also with Northwest Natural and several other stakeholders. And we are happy to provide that. I believe Connor has a letter easy to provide to you so you can see what we send in on the VW program. On the next page, we, in general, work with stakeholders on the state mitigation plans. So we're trying to work with groups such as yourself, with station builders, with vehicle manufacturers, fuel providers, et cetera, to talk with each of the state people. And frankly, across the country so far, this has been a bit of a slow-moving target. As you can understand, when the trustee was just named 6 weeks, 2 months ago, and the trust still has not been formally started, the states jumped out last October and started thinking about plans and all of that, and then it just dragged on and on and on. So a lot of them have just said, you know, we're not going to do anything until the trust is actually formalized. Now, Oregon's a little different, so is Washington. Both have active programs to gather information. So one of the things I suggest is getting on Oregon's website to take a look, and Washington's to take a look at what they have as information, and we're looking for additional meetings in both places. There's some fairly active programs there that you could look at. So then we pursue key states for ongoing NGV policy, and we've had an active year with policy. We're very close on the bill for weight limits in Oregon. In fact, it's passed the House and Senate, and we're waiting for signatures, so that's great news. Washington already has taken care of that 2,000-pound weight limit. We're getting diesel gallon equivalents and that type of thing all set now that the national committees approved that definition. And these are just some of the examples of things we're working on. We also are looking at states that have tax credit programs that may be winding down to get them extended, and that information is there. So basically, we just are taking a little different tack over the last couple of years. I used to be the chair of the committee without actually working for NGVA, and now I am part-time working with NGVA so that I can be more available to dive deeper into the states and work both on VW and policy issues. Next slide, please. So really what we'd like to do is just put down some bullets here and go over the bullets that we have that talk about us working together. So we have a set of contact information on who the right people are to work with for the VW program, and we'd appreciate additional updates to that information as each of you goes in and talks with people. We're looking to gain active support from our members and from stakeholders so that there's active participation. A little bit of an example of why that's necessary. Recently, a slide was shown at the ACT Expo that Gladstein Anderson Associates put together. And the slide, essentially a pie chart, showed the input that Colorado has received by the type of fuel. And it's really just a sheer volume, how many people responded, not any kind of weighting on what they felt the comments were. But the sheer volume showed roughly 75% favoring electric vehicles. And that isn't because 75% of Colorado's people favor electric vehicles. It's because the electric vehicle coalitions got out, got vocal, and presented in town halls and presented their written comments. So I encourage each of you as individual companies, organizations to get out there and put your name on the NGV column. And electrics are great, propane's great. It's, all of the above works, but we need to make sure we're visible because at this point, we have the most to offer as far as what you've seen from Jeff's presentation, as far as total vehicles through class 4 to 8. And that needs to be known and needs to be supported. We can pursue the key states together. And again, you can see in the top largest states, 70 million plus, we've got Oregon, we've got Washington. So these are very key states. It's also states that are natural gas and NGV leaders. Oklahoma comes to mind, Texas, Colorado. Oregon's done a good job, and Washington has too with some of its port issues, so and some of its programs. So, again, people who are already knowledgeable, and excuse the APGA reference, that should be Northwest Gas Association, but where you have strong relationships, how can we leverage those relationships together and get the best result? So the next step that we're looking at is best opportunities for face-to-face meetings. We have been trying to get some face-to-face meetings, and we don't get necessarily turned down, but it's, again, based on the trust not being finalized yet. It's basically a let's touch base as soon as that is announced, and we'll go from there. So I think that would be something we'd like to set up in your territory and get those meetings. And you need to communicate the best value proposition for NGVs. So op-eds, articles, other media, webinars, presentations, state Volkswagen group meetings. I participate regularly on several of those. So happy to help, just need you to reach out and let us know. From a perspective of actual resources, on the right-hand side with the green check marks, we have contact lists, we have comment letters. We have sent comment letters to every state and DC at this point, and we'll be following that up because as states maybe didn't have a formal request, we turned in a letter anyway. Now they have formal requests, so we turn in another letter, and maybe it's updated with some specifics based on what they've put together. Case in point, I just recently talked with Kevin Downey in Oregon and said, okay, on April 7th, I submitted the Oregon letter. Here it is again because it wasn't within your period of time. And he said, no problem, we've got that. It's part of the attachment. So we're working hard to stay up with that, and any information you can give us would be helpful. We have a presentation that you've seen today. We have a longer version that even goes into natural gas and pipelines and abundance and that type of thing. But we have variations on that. We have an overview flyer. It's a 2-pager on VW, and it shows a summary of those sector pictures that Jeff had on the best use of your dollars to reduce the most NOx. And then we have individual sector flyers that are, again, 2-pagers front and back that have transit refuse, school bus, and trucking, and show the advantages and the NOx reduction, but on the flip side, show some examples of companies that have done this and are moving forward with it. We have technical support data, so Jeff has the backup on the numbers that you've seen today. We have other technical data that's available, and we can do some research on things that are needed. And then you have us, the staff that's ready, willing, and able to work with you and are looking forward to that. That's all I have. So next slide, and then I guess we're ready for questions.
Great, thank you, Sherry.
Yeah, I think we'll...
So we do not have any questions right now, so I encourage anyone who has any to go to the chat function on the GoToMeeting control panel and type those there. In the meantime, I just want to let everyone know that both Sherry and Jeff have been very helpful in terms of finding applicable information for various projects, or just generally as we've gone through this process with the VW settlement. They've been a great resource to us, and I encourage you to think of them in the same way, because they're very knowledgeable about this and have quite a few resources in this NGV space. So thank you guys for taking the time to do this, as well as for your help, both on our end of the VW settlement piece and just in general for the work that you're doing on behalf of the industry in this region.
Well, we're glad to do it. Thank you for having us, Connor. Happy to do more of these. We got to get the message out. So thank you.
Absolutely. So I will give folks about 30 seconds here to enter their questions into the chat function, and we will sign off if that does not happen. So we do have a question that just came through, and the question is, has there been much support from manufacturers, which also seem to offer diesel technology?
Well, so the first part, without the last part on diesel, there's been a lot of support from our members who are manufacturers. We created a subgroup that got together and really strategized on the materials we put together. And engine manufacturers are very involved in that. School bus manufacturers are involved in that, truck manufacturers and so forth. So, all those companies have folks who focus on natural gas, and they have folks who focus on diesel. So when you're thinking of Freightliner and Bluebird and companies like that, we interact with the folks who want to see the alt fuels sell well, and they're very energized about this. I imagine their colleagues who work on the diesel side are energized about this as well. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think we've seen a little bit of difficulty with some examples with folks who are whose diesel businesses are sort of their bread and butter, and are having a little bit of difficulty with thinking about natural gas as part of their business going forward. Have you seen any of that?
Well, I mean, that sounds like it's talking about dealerships more than maybe the manufacturers. So, I'm not as close to that. I mean, we don't have the network of dealerships as membership. A lot of dealerships have requested the materials that we're putting together, and they've asked to be on our listserv for updates. But I'm not sure I have a good response for, how they're gonna interact with their customers. I know the folks at the headquarters for these companies who are in the all fuel programs are very supportive.
Sure. So we've got sort of a follow-up comment, which is that a lot of this NGV, the case for NGVs is sort of pitted against diesel. It's sort of difficult to make a case and expect a manufacturer like Freightliner to get behind some of the messages that don't flatter diesel. So yeah, I think that's interesting that you do have some interest from these folks who are signing up for your listservs, and I think that's encouraging.
Yeah, and this really is an environmental focused program. So the NOx reductions is front and center, and with today's economics, where fuel prices are, we've made a big play out of the environmental benefits. And I think we have to, because you have a lot of states that are of the mind that, well, we'll just put this in the diesel vehicles. They're 90% cleaner than they used to be. They meet the 2010 standard, and then they just want to move on. They don't want to do anything that they perceive that might require more work. But the reality is that we think we've made a strong case that we have a much, much cleaner product, much more cost effective when you look at the total NOx reduced. And that maybe in some of these applications, diesel isn't a good fit. I hope that came through loud and clear or effectively.
Yeah.
I think one comment I'd add to this is that all but one of the majority truck manufacturers offer CNG, LNG, and so you can get natural gas or diesel. So as far as the manufacturers are concerned, they can go either way. And the dealerships, typically, same thing.
Yeah. That's a good point. Thank you, Dave, for the question. We do not have any other questions. So at this point, I just want to thank Jeff and Sherry again. And hopefully everyone will have your contact info, which is shown on the slide right now, and use that as much as is helpful. And again, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.